Let's practice finding the area of parallelograms together. Now the formula we're going to be using here is the area of each of these parallelograms is going to be equal to the length of the base multiplied by the length of the height. For number one, let's see what information that we have to start with. So for the base, even though this is going to be 6 on the top side, that means it's going to be the same on the bottom if it's a rectangle. So we know the base is going to be 6 centimeters. Now, what about the height? For the height, that's going to be going up and down or perpendicular to the base. That looks like it's going to be 4 centimeters on both sides. So we're going to go ahead and say that the height here is going to be 4 centimeters. Now, we don't know the area, which is what we're going to be solving for. So let's go ahead and try that out. So we know the formula. Let's go ahead and write that first. That's going to be area is equal to base times height, BH. Okay. We don't know capital A or the area, so let's keep it the same. Now we do know the base, so let's make a substitution. B is going to be 6 centimeters, we said, so it's going to be 6 centimeters. And I'm just going to use parentheses to show the multiplication, but I'm going to multiply that by the height of 4 centimeters. Okay, now next we're going to take this 6 and 4 and multiplying 6 and 4 together, that's going to be 24. And then when we multiply the units of centimeters by centimeters, that's going to end up being centimeters squared. Hopefully that makes sense because 1 dimension times 1 dimension is going to get us something in 2 dimensions. So filling that in, we can say the area of this rectangle is going to be 24 square centimeters or centimeters squared. Here's number 2. For number 2, to find out the base first, we have this 4.7 going across the top, so it must be also 4.7 on the bottom. Go ahead and put 4.7 inches. Now as for the height is going to be going up and down or perpendicular to the base, so that looks like it's going to be 8.6 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and put 8.6 IN for the inches. And then let's go ahead and see if we can figure out the area because we're not given that information. So first things first, let's always start by writing the formula. Area is equal to base times height. We don't know the area, so keep it as capital A. Now the lowercase b or the base is going to be 4.7 inches. Let's go ahead and write that in parentheses and then multiply that by the height of 8.6 inches. Now we're going to go ahead and multiply these numbers together of 4.7 and 8.6. I'm going to go ahead and do that on the side here, so go ahead and multiply those decimals out. So multiplying that out, we're going to get 40 and 42 hundredths, okay? And then if we multiply inches by inches, again, that's going to be 1 dimension by 1 dimension. You're going to get inches squared because this is how many of those 1 inch by 1 inch squares that would fit inside of this rectangle. So putting that information up here, we can say the area is going to be 40.42 square inches. Here's number 3. For number 3, we have a parallelogram, which is going to have the same formula as a rectangle in terms of finding the area. So the base here is just going to be this top measurement going all the way across, which is the same as this measurement here, which is the base or the bottom. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and write that's going to be 7.3 meters. And what about the height? Now for the height, you have to be careful. We need to find out how tall this shape is, but we have to find a length that is perpendicular to the base or makes a 90-degree angle. So that height is going to be this 5.4 meters going all the way up and down. So the height here is going to be 5.4 meters. Okay, let's go ahead and find out the area. So very similar to the last couple, hopefully you're getting the hang of it a little bit better. Okay, so capital A equals lowercase b times lowercase h. Capital A is equal to lowercase b, which we know is 7.3 meters, times lowercase h for the height is going to be 5.4 meters. All right, let's go ahead and multiply these two dimensions together to get how many of these 1 by 1 meter squares would be inside this shape. So go ahead and do that on the side. Multiplying them together, we're going to get 39.42. And then in terms of our units, we have meters multiplied by meters, and that's just going to get us meters squared. Putting this all together, we can say that the area here is going to be 39.42, or 39 and 42 hundredths square meters would be inside of this parallelogram. Here's number 4. For number 4, it looks like we have another rectangle. We need to find the base here. Do we have that? Well, let's see. We have the base here is going to be 6 yards because it's the same on the top and the bottom. So I'll go ahead and write 6 yards for the base. Now what about the height? Now for the height here, that's going to be this measurement going all the way from the top to the bottom. That's perpendicular to the base. Doesn't look like we have that information, so let's leave that blank for now. And for the area, well, we're given the area, it's 48 square yards. So let's go ahead and write that in. It's 48 square yards, or yards squared. Okay, so a little bit different of a problem. Let's go ahead and write our formula down here. Our formula is going to be capital A for the area is going to be equal to lower b times lower h, okay, lowercase. And so we actually know the area here, so let's go ahead and replace that capital A with 48 square yards, or yards squared. And let's go ahead and replace the b, or substitute in b, with 6 yards, 6 yd for yards. And we don't know the height, so we're going to multiply that by h. Now, if we know that 6 is going to multiply by some number to get 48, then we should go ahead and maybe use the opposite operation. So the opposite of multiplication is going to be division, right? So let's go ahead and divide this right side here by 6 yards so that we don't have it anymore on the right side. We're just going to be left with 1h, or h. And if we divide the right side by 6 yards, we should divide the left side by 6 yards as well, using that division property of equality. Okay. On the right side, 6 over 6 is just going to become 1. Yards over yards also just becomes 1. So on the right side of the equation, we're just left with 1h, or just h. On the left side, if we take 48 and divide by 6, that's going to equal 8. And then if we take this yards squared and divide it by yards, that's just going to equal yards, right? So on top there's yards times yards, but on the bottom there's only one set of yards. So you could think about it as this yards canceling out with one of the yards on top. So in conclusion, I'm just going to say that the height of this rectangle should be 8 yards. And we can put that up top as 8 yards. And if you want to check this, you should be able to multiply 6 times 8 to get the 48, and then the yards times the yards to get yards squared. Keeping track of these units, keep in mind that if we divide yards by yards, they cancel out. If we divide the yards squared over here by the yards, we're still left with yards. Just like how that hopefully makes sense, that yards times yards gets you yards squared. And that's why for our answer here, the height is going to be just 8 yards. Here's number 5. For number 5, let's see, do we have the base here? Well, the base is going to be going across. Looks like we don't have the base, so let's go ahead and leave that blank for now. What about the height? The height looks like it's going to be this 8 inches from the top to the bottom, so we do know the height in this case. Let's go ahead and write it's 8 inches. And then for the area we are told is 53.6. We know it's the area because it's in squared inches, or inches squared. So that's going to be 53.6 inches squared. All right, let's go ahead and write the formula down. Area is equal to base times height. The area we know is 53.6 inches squared. Now the base we don't know, so let's leave it as b. We're going to multiply it by what? Actually, I'm going to use parentheses to multiply. The height is going to be 8 inches. So this means the base multiplied by 8 inches. So if we know the base times 8 gets you 53.6, then hopefully we know that 53.6 divided by 8 would get you that base, right? So how are we going to show this algebraically? Well, on the right side, we can go ahead and get rid of the 8 inches by dividing by 8 inches. On the left side, we can do that as well and also divide by 8 inches. Why do that? Well, on the right side, 8 divided by 8 is just 1. Inches divided by inches is just 1. So on the right side, we'll be just left with 1b, or just b. And on the left side, we need to go ahead and divide this 53.6 by 8. So let's go ahead and do that on the side. So feel free to go ahead and do that. So it looks like 53.6 divided by 8 is going to be this 6.7. So go ahead and write 6.7. And then if we take this inches squared and divide it by inches, that's just going to be inches. Okay, so we can go ahead and say that hopefully this unit here of inches squared and inches, when we divided inches on both sides, canceled out on the right side. When we divided by on the left side, we were still left with inches. Okay, so we just found out here that the base, I'm just going to turn this around because I like it on the left side, writing my variable, is 6.7 inches. So I'm going to write 6.7 inches for the base. Again, if you want to check this, just to double check and make sure, 6.7 times 8 should equal this 53.6, and then inches times inches equals inches squared. Alrighty, let's go ahead and move on to number 6. For number 6, we have a parallelogram here. For the base, that's going to be all the way across the bottom, so it looks like we have that information. It's 12.7, which means that this top part would also be 12.7, but it doesn't really matter right now, so I'm going to write 12.7 meters. Okay. Now what about the height? How tall is this shape? Well, keep in mind that this height is going to be this measurement going straight up and down. So while we have this 0.9 meters, that does help us if we need the perimeter. It's not helpful for us right now when we're solving for the height. So we're going to be looking for the height. And for the area here, that's going to be this 10.16 square meters. So we know the area here. So hopefully if you know the area, you're going to need to be doing some division at some point here. All right, so let's start by writing the formula. Area equals base times height. We know the area is going to be 10.16 square meters, and that's equal to the base, which is going to be 12.7 meters, multiplied by the height. Now we don't know the height, so I'm going to leave it as an h for now. Now, if we know that this 12.7 times h is equal to 10.16, then we should be able to say that 10.16 divided by 12.7 would get us h. So how are we going to show that? Well, on the right side, to get h alone, let's divide by 12.7 meters. And if we do that, then on the left side, we should also divide by 12.7 meters. Now, why divide by 12.7? Well, on the right side, the 12.7 over 12.7 becomes 1. The meters over meters also becomes 1. So on the right side, we just have 1h, or just h. Now for the left side, we have to do a little bit more work. We have to take this 10.16 and divide it by this 12.7 now. Alrighty, so if we divide this 10.16 divided by 12.7, it's going to get us something smaller than 1 because we're dividing by something bigger here. So that's going to be 0.8. Okay, and then if we divide this meters squared by meters, hopefully we know that's going to be just meters now. Okay, so the units of meters and meters on the right side just cancel out, but on the left side we still have meters here. And just turning this around, I'm going to say that the height is going to be 0.8 meters, just being consistent with how I've been laying out everything else. And so we can just say this is going to be 0.8 meters for the height of this parallelogram. Here's number 7. For number 7, it looks like we have a square. So the base here is going to be this 6.3 going across, which is still 6.3 on the bottom. So the base is going to be 6.3 centimeters. The height here is just going to be up and down, so that's going to be the 6.3 as well. That's how we know it is, by definition, a square. So the 6.3 and 6.3 are the same. And let's go ahead and see if we can find the area. Now, if we know it's a square, we can use the base times height formula. We can also just use area equals side squared, but I'll just be consistent and use BH. But sometimes you may see people write area equals S squared or side squared, and you can use that if you'd like as well. So the area is going to be the base, which is going to be 6.3 centimeters, multiplied by the height, which is also 6.3 centimeters. Now let's go ahead and see if we can multiply 6.3 by 6.3. So multiplying 6.3 by 6.3, we're going to get 39 and 69 hundredths. And then if we multiply the centimeters by centimeters, that's going to get us centimeters squared. Okay, so we had centimeters here, and we multiplied by centimeters, and that's why we're getting an area which is two-dimensional, and that's going to be 39.69 centimeters squared. Here's one last practice problem. For number 8, let's see, we have another square here. So for the base, it looks like we don't know that off the beginning. We don't know this top and the bottom, so we're going to be solving for it. Okay. Now for the height, that's going to be this distance from the top to the bottom. So that's going to be from here to here and here to here. So let's go ahead and write, this is going to be 7.4 yards. Okay. Finally, for the area, we know that's going to be 54.76. Let's go ahead and write 54.76 yards squared. Okay. So let's see if we can figure out the base. So our formula is area is equal to base times height. The area is 54.76, and that's yards squared. That's equal to the base, which we don't know. And we're going to multiply that by the height, which we do know, and that's 7.4 yards. All right, so we've done a few like this before, but if we know this unknown times 7.4 is 54.76, then we know 54.76 divided by 7.4 will get us that unknown. So what are we going to do to get that b by itself? Let's go ahead and do what we just said and divide. Let's divide by 7.4 yards on the right. But if we do that on the right, we should divide it on the left as well. That's using the division property of equality. 7.4 divided by 7.4 goes bye-bye. These yards also go bye-bye. They become 1. So on the right side of the equation, we just get 1b or b. And on the left side, we have to do some division. So 54.76 divided by 7.4. Let's go ahead and do that on the side. Alrighty, so dividing this 54.76 by 7.4, we find out that's going to be 7.4, and then if we take this yard squared divided by yards, that's just going to be yards. Okay, so our units should all match here. Yards over yards on the right side, cancel out, went bye-bye. On the left side, yards squared divided by yards, we were just left with yards here, which hopefully makes sense. So the base here is going to be 7.4 yards. Which tells us something actually kind of interesting about this particular parallelogram, and that is that we found a square. So both dimensions are 7.4 yards. So there you have 8 different practice problems on finding the area of parallelograms, or using the area and a dimension to find out the other dimension. If you found the video helpful, please consider giving it a thumbs up and sharing with a classmate or friend who might also find it helpful. And as always, keep up the great work that you're already doing, and I'll see you in the next one.